Hello and welcome to another episode of the WEM Video Academy. Today we are going to have a look at building a multi-step form wizard. Let's take this simple flowchart as a starting point. We see an interaction node showing a data grid of 60 fictional customers. The database list contains personal data, as well as address data, and some customer characteristics. We now want to build an entry form to submit new customers to the list, as well as modifying existing ones. Since the customer rows have quite a few fields in different groups, an entry form showing all fields at the same time would not provide a good user experience. This is where a multi-step form wizard comes in. It will request the customer input in a number of consecutive steps in order to provide overview and clarity to the user. We are going to build the multi-step form in a single interaction node. This will make it easier to maintain the flow, and it will provide a cleaner and more compact flowchart. Besides, it will also allow us to build conditional logic in the flow, in case we would need to show different steps for different cases. In order to build the form in a single interaction node, we need to be able to identify in which step of the input process we are. This is the role of the step counter, which we will create as a session field first. The step counter will show the form input related to the step. Let's say the first step is personal data. In the overlay node, we will create a conditional component, checking that the step counter value equals 1. Inside the conditional, we will build a form component requesting the personal data of the new customer. We can do this by selecting the personal data fields in the requested order and drag them into a conditional to create a form. We should not forget to initialize the step counter before we enter the overlay node for the first time. Since we need this step for both adding and modifying customers, we will place the assignment node right here. After placement, we will reroute both the add and modify exits to this first step value. In order to get to the next or the previous step of the input process, we need to increment or decrement the step counter by 1. We can do this by creating two assignment nodes like this, one for incrementing or add 1, and one for decrementing or subtract 1. We link to the assignment nodes using two exits in the flowchart like this, and we will of course connect the return exits. In the overlay node, the buttons will be placed on either side of the bottom button bar. The next button will be on the right-hand side, and the previous button on the left-hand side. We will add a relevant icon to both buttons, on the right-hand side and on the left-hand side of the button text. Let's do a first test of the flowchart. When clicking a customer row, we see the overlay appearing in the personal data input form. Once we click Next or Previous, we will see the content disappearing, which is logical at this point. We will now add the other input steps. We add the conditionals for Step 2 for address data, and Step 3 for customer properties, and some labels inside the conditionals. Then, in the same way as before, we select the address data fields in the right order and we create a form inside the conditional. And we do the same for customer properties. Now, when we save and switch to preview again, we see that the previous and next buttons will show us the relevant input for every step. Okay, we now have the basics of the multi-step form, but we need to make it more robust. For instance, we need to make sure that the user cannot keep clicking the previous and next buttons if there are no steps left. We also need to show the discard and save buttons, of course. An elegant way to do that would be to replace the previous button by a discard button in the first step, and the next button by a save button in the last step. We need to check the current step for that. First, we will add the discard and save buttons on either side of the button bar. We will put the save button on the right-hand side in green with a save icon, and we will put the discard button on the left-hand side, in orange with an undo icon. This will make the dialog look like this. Next, we will set the visibilities for the first step and the last step. In the first step, we will show the discard button or step equals 1 and hide the previous button or step greater than 1. In the last step, we will show the save button or step equals 3 and hide the next button or step less than 3. We use the literal value 3 for the final step number here, so make sure to update that when your number of steps will change in the future. In all of the steps in between, we will only show the previous and next buttons, which requires no further visibility actions. Let's preview again. We see the visibility of the buttons getting updated as planned. Discard replaces previous in the first step, while save takes the place of next in the last step. This means we have fulfilled our security measure that the user cannot click outside the step range, while at the same time we have our discard and save features on board. Now let's have a look at the required status of fields. We will add a required status to several fields in the personal and address data forms, because we want to make sure that we will get all the required data for a new entry. Now, when adding a new customer, we see that the next button works fine since it requires the data. However, we also see that the previous button does not work anymore, unless we fill out the current step first. That is bad UX. In order to make the previous button work in any case, we will set the Ignore Changes property only for the previous exit in the flowchart. This will overrule the required field status and allow the user to move back in the form. Hold on, now we see something weird happening. When we press the previous button, we see the overlay node going blank. Why is this happening? The Ignore Changes setting in an exit ignores changes not only done to the database fields, but also to the session fields in the exit flow. In this case, the assignment node, step counter -1. The value of the step counter is being erased here. Luckily, we have a cure for this. We will use an execute process node called confirm session changes directly after changing the step counter in both directions. This process overrules the ignore changes setting. We will drag the process node in between the two assignment nodes and reroute the exits of both of them through the process node to the overlay node. Just like this. When we test again, we will see the step counter works as before, and that the previous button works as expected. Now, what if we want to check the contents of fields in combination with each other? For instance, two fields are not required by themselves, but only if the other field is empty. For this purpose, we can use a validator component. This validator can check the content of any of the fields by an expression and only allow exiting the step when the condition has been met. The validator presents itself as a pink container with an expression and a message. Let's add a yes/no field checking whether the customer is over 21 years of age. We will now require that the date of birth has been set or that this check has been clicked. One of the two needs to be true. Now we paste our example validator here. The condition says that either the date of birth field or the over 21 radio check needs to have a value. Otherwise, this message will appear. Note that the validator expression defines the desired situation, while the message inside the validator appears in case the desired condition has not been met. Finally, let's test the addition of customers again, using the previous and next buttons while challenging the required status of the fields. In the first step, we see that the name fields in the validator are working perfectly. We will fill out some values and click the Over 21 option. The second step allows us to move back without filling the fields, but it will still insist on the required fields when moving forward. Again, adding some more fields to advance. And now the third step shows the Save button for us to add our multi-step input to the database. We see that our multi-step input form works perfectly. And that concludes our video. We hope you enjoyed it. Please leave your feedback in the comments below and share the video with your colleagues and friends. We hope to see you soon again in the WEM Video Academy.